Well, McClunky.
This will be the final word in the story of Skywalker.
Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage, and maybe we shouldn't have trusted in JJ too much. But to get it out of the way first, overall I enjoyed a lot of The Rise of Skywalker, but I was also very disappointed by a lot of the decisions in it, and I think it's a very cluttered affair altogether. But I also want to point out that it's almost impossible to come to a final verdict on a new Star Wars film after just one viewing, and after just a few hours after that viewing. There's a lot to take in and think about, but since I also want to give you my first impressions, here we are. Just keep in mind, it's exactly that. My first impressions. Of course, this will also be a no spoilers review, but since I know how picky many people are when it comes to spoilers and what qualifies as one and what doesn't, be warned, after all, I want to share at least some thoughts with you. I also warn you that this will of course be a review of The Rise of Skywalker, but since we are talking Star Wars, it will also be a lot of thoughts I have about the whole franchise, and it will take some minutes for me to really approach the newest entry. First, let me reiterate where I stand on the recent Star Wars movies in general. Of the 5 new films, I only really care for the saga ones. I don't think Rogue One or Solo are bad, but they are just mediocre to me, and when it comes to Star Wars, I have really high standards, and if I don't love an entry, I just don't really care that much about it at all. Maybe that's a strange stance, but that's why I only really embrace the original trilogy, and up until now the 2 new saga films, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And yes, I'm also someone who considers The Last Jedi to be a good film. Not a great one anymore, since it did fall quite a bit over time for me, but overall I still appreciate a lot of it. Especially what Rian Johnson did with Luke's character, the question of Rey's heritage, the new way the Force can bring together people who are far away physically, and also a lot of the visual splendor. But the best of the 5 new films still has to be The Force Awakens for me, because even if it does mix a lot of old ingredients, it definitely brought back that big cinematic Star Wars feel and magic for me. It has that high energy, vigor and a very organic feel to the world and to the characters. And it also brought us a new great score by John Williams, whose specific melodies and grandeur are also key reasons why I enjoyed the saga films a lot more than Rogue One or Solo. As you might imagine, I don't really want to go too much into the whole laborious discussion about The Last Jedi and how it's a very divisive film among fans. I might come back to some of it throughout the review, but let's talk about the new movie now. J.J. Abrams, who revived the franchise in 2015, has come back to bring it to an end. Back when this new trilogy was announced, it was still Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow attached to episode 9, with J.J. Abrams really having no ambitions to do more than one movie in the director's chair. But now he was the one with the extremely difficult task to bring it to a satisfying ending, to come up with an idea for what it's all about in the first place, because unlike The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, The Last Jedi had a lot less clear-cut threads to continue. In a surprising turn of events, Rian Johnson even killed off Supreme Leader Snoke, who many thought would be this trilogy's new version of the Emperor. I really liked that choice because it not only undermined our expectations, but it also made way for a much more interesting character to fill that spot. Adam Driver's Kylo Ren, who became the new leader of the First Order. But as you all know, Emperor Palpatine is back in this one, so that's that. One big criticism about this new trilogy has only grown stronger over the course of the last years, and that is the lack of a thought-out overall story for all 3 movies. Back in the days after the release of The Force Awakens, many were baffled by some comments by the filmmakers that they are so happy with the positive feedback to our new group of heroes and that they will keep playing a big part in the upcoming movies. Wasn't that the plan all along? At the latest, with the release of The Last Jedi, it became rather obvious that there hasn't been a big plan where this new story should go. Honestly, I kind of liked how The Last Jedi felt like an answer or a comment on The Force Awakens, more so than just a clear continuation. But I also agree that this can be quite problematic when it comes to finding a great conclusion to what you have started. In general, I'm also of the mindset that it's important to have a good idea for your overarching narrative. If you already know that you're making a trilogy, please consider where it begins, what will happen, and where it will all end. The original trilogy certainly didn't have this, even if many fans want to argue otherwise. On its release, A New Hope was just Star Wars. And neither for the audience, nor the filmmakers themselves, even its creator George Lucas, was Darth Vader the father of Luke, nor was Leia Luke's sister. All that came later. Yet in the end, it all worked out rather well, some smaller and some bigger plot holes aside. And what we got is still one of the very best movie trilogies of all time, and also the main reason why I became such a passionate lover of films in general. Now, bringing back Palpatine for the big finale might not be any less imaginative than making a second Death Star the new threatening toy in Return of the Jedi. Just on paper, I'm not the biggest fan of the decision to bring back the Emperor, but in the end, it's all about the way they do it. And at least to some degree, it works fine. It definitely injects some of that sinister joy all of us love so much about the character, but without taking away the evil and the darkness. I don't like the prequels at all, and I know that many consider Ian McDiarmid's Palpatine one of the few highlights of it, but I find most of it way too cartoonish. But it's not really his fault. The way he's portrayed in The Rise of Skywalker at least feels way more cinematic and creepy. His lair is really nightmarish and the lighting is fantastic. It's like a never-ending thunderstorm. It's like Frankenstein's laboratory and it just oozes wickedness. But the presentation aside, unfortunately, I'm not a fan of where this all goes and what revelations there are. In general, the theme, if you can even call it that, definitely seems to be no one's ever really gone. It's not just Palpatine's return, but it also manifests itself in the way other characters go and pop up again. Without going into details, but there are some little twists that felt like cop-outs to me, and the sheer amount of people and things reappearing or coming up again got a bit obnoxious with time. I totally get that this is the last film and the perfect time to do it, but for me it was too much. The whole film felt too much for me, and this, alongside a lot of its decisions about story and characters, is probably my biggest gripe with it. It feels as if there's so much Star Wars in this one film that it's getting ridiculous. Now, what do I mean by that? The original Star Wars was this big, spectacular space opera, a myth among the stars, a hero's journey in a galaxy far, far away. What Spielberg and Lucas did, especially with Indiana Jones and Star Wars, was to create these breathtaking A-class motion pictures that, at their heart, truly were B-movies. Both Indiana Jones and Star Wars have strong roots in B-level serials from the 1930s. As a matter of fact, Lucas first wanted to remake Flash Gordon, instead making Star Wars, but he didn't get the rights. Star Wars is a movie about space wizards, a strange force, giant space stations that can destroy whole planets and so on. It's big, crazy adventure stories. The very first film already mentioned something called the Clone Wars, so we shouldn't complain too much about all-powerful supervillains defeating death and ever-increasing super weapons that threaten whole solar systems. It has always been part of the DNA. But I think the best of Star Wars, and for me that's first and foremost the original trilogy, and with some restrictions also The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, also always had at least some kind of simplicity to it and grace. It's a big world full of strange creatures, planets and so on, but the core characters, their relationships and motivations, their ambitions and dreams, it has been rather simple and it's very easy to relate to. It's good versus evil, it's old mentors and young pupils or padawans, it's scoundrels and princesses, it's the light side and the temptations of the dark. And it's also about the presentation, the audiovisual simplicity or clarity, the might of the empire, the plight of the rebellion, the hero who's looking to the stars, the villain who's grabbing his adversaries at the neck, and the fantastic, vivid cinematography, beautiful craftsmanship on display, the epic music by John Williams, the wit of the characters, the charm of the actors. That and more is why I love Star Wars so much. And The Rise of Skywalker has a lot of that going for it. But The Rise of Skywalker is also so cluttered with stuff, so filled with fan service, so jumpy when it comes to the story progression and character arcs, that I felt this simplicity got almost completely lost. Let's talk about the story, of course without really saying too much about it, so that you can still experience it for yourself. A lot of the core story is built like this scavenger hunt, which in general I kind of like because it goes back to Rey's root as a scavenger. And J.J. Abrams does indeed succeed to some degree in bringing all the different elements of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi together, so that it seems all connected. Now, I just saw it once and it is a very fast moving film, so it's hard for me to tell, but I definitely had some questions while watching, and I think a lot of our protagonist's quest is a bit messy, depending on a lot of luck, or could have been way easier regarding certain things that are possible in Star Wars, talking about Force ghosts. Normally, I really enjoy J.J. Abrams' frantic style. His 2 Star Trek movies paved the way and The Force Awakens continued it. Everything and everybody is always moving. The story and the action are fast-paced. It seems as if everybody is always already too late. Time is of the essence, and it's realized with a great eye for small details as well, and a lot of it I liked in The Rise of Skywalker as well. There's a moment in the Millennium Falcon where Finn is jumping over something that just fell over. It's basically the complete opposite of George Lucas's style for the prequels, where everybody was constantly just walking and talking, or standing and talking, or sitting and talking. In the scenes aside from the CGI action, of course. But now in The Rise of Skywalker, it often felt as if it was covering up the fact that many elements of the plot weren't that well thought out. But again, just my first impression. The whole story progression felt cluttered. We jumped back and forth between so many different places, and unfortunately I felt the same when it comes to the big and important character moments. One aspect that I enjoyed so much about The Last Jedi was the struggle between Kylo Ren and Rey, with him wanting to bring her to his side and her trying to bring him back to the light. At the end of that film, it seemed pretty clear where they stand. But of course, this is Star Wars, so we will continue basically the same conflict in The Rise of Skywalker. To me, it felt redundant, a bit confusing and also a bit silly with Kylo destroying his helmet in the last one and now putting it back together. Of course, I won't give away how both characters turn out at the very end, but I just say that I didn't like the choices because I don't think they are deserved. Which brings me back to the Emperor and how all character pieces on the board come together. Again, I'm treading on thin spoiler ice here, but again, I have to say I didn't like specific choices at all. Some of it felt downright ridiculous to me, and that's why I went on that whole talk about simplicity and grace. More often than not, The Rise of Skywalker feels like a big pile of Star Wars fantasy goo. It's a natural problem you run into when you keep continuing a story like this. I preferred the way Johnson was going, even if I dislike a lot of elements from his movie. But in Abrams' film, a lot of the important plot points felt several notches too B-movie-ish. Just too much. I understand that they want to end this with a bang, and I can't really estimate how people will take it, but with all the stuff and all the revelations happening here, there came the point where I thought to myself that this is just a big pile of sci-fi fantasy trash. And of course I know this is one of the most expensive movies ever made, and a lot of it even plays great, but as a total package I just didn't buy into it. Now that might change with a second viewing, now that I know all of its outcomes, but for the time being it's a letdown for me. And you might not believe me after all these harsh words, but I was actually enjoying a lot of the movie. Like I said, I have very high standards when it comes to Star Wars. Something that I really loved, for example, is the way they continued that whole new force power Rian Johnson introduced in The Last Jedi, where people are at different places and yet are able to connect, talk and even physically interact with each other. There are several scenes in which Kylo and Rey do this, and the way this shot, the way the scenery changes and the way certain objects are affected by this was really great and exciting to watch. And like you expect from a J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie, A lot of it is exciting to watch. I especially liked an early chase scene, the one which a part was already in the trailers and TV spots, where our heroes are chased through the desert by some First Order troopers. Abrams knows how to compose shots, how to direct action, how to give you this exhilarating space adventure feeling. Strangely enough, I thought the very last battle was lacking in that regard. It felt too hectic, too cluttered, and because it borrows so much from older Star Wars movies, it lacked originality as well. The humor wasn't as strong as in The Force Awakens, but when it comes to the emotions, I can't lie and pretend that I didn't tear up or that I didn't feel for these characters, which was a very weird experience. On one hand, I thought a lot of the decisions by Abrams and co-screenwriter Chris Terrio were baffling or downright wrong, undeserving and not paying off enough. On the other hand, I still got very emotional more than once because I find it hard to resist the beautiful music of John Williams, and I also just can't push away my lifelong investment in this saga. And while I'm at it, the music by Williams is hard not to love, but like so many other elements, I think they overdo it by constantly playing all kinds of familiar tunes from all saga films. It felt like fan service, and so did many other things as well. The way they treat Carrie Fisher though was mostly very good, and I was surprised how well it fitted, considering that she passed away before they really began shooting. You can feel that they tried the best they could with the material they got. The two biggest new characters, on the other hand, felt very underwritten. There is one woman in a mask who mostly interacts with Poe, and one without a mask who mostly interacts with Finn. But both relationships stay very shallow. Kelly Marie Tran's character Rose gets completely pushed to the background, and what they did to Domhnall Gleeson's character Hux felt like a bad joke to me. So I guess that sums up my overall first impressions about The Rise of Skywalker. They might as well change after a second viewing, but this is where I stand right now. So in German I'd say, Star Wars Episode 9, der Aufstieg Skywalkers, ist leider nicht das spannende und erfüllende Finale, das ich mir erhofft habe. Mitreißend und emotional ist der Film allemal und vieles macht auch wirklich Spaß. Die Geschichte, was er mit seinen Charakteren macht und seine generelle Tendenz, den ultimativen Star Wars Film abfeuern zu wollen, macht ihn aber auch zu einem vollgestopften, hibbeligen und teilweise echt lächerlich wirkenden Star Wars Brei. It's hard for me to give a rating, but right now I'm between 6 and 7. I have to go with my gut feeling here, so it's a 6 out of 10. More like 6.4, but I don't do that. Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about The Rise of Skywalker. Are you happy with the decisions? What was your favorite scene? Is this the finale you wanted? Let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Letterboxd simply at TheJimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell. McClunky.